All right. Okay, well, welcome everyone to the Mother Lode. Thank you for being here. I'm going to begin by acknowledging the original custodians of the land of which I sit, specifically the Wadi Wadi tribe. And I want to extend this acknowledgement out to the custodians and to the lands of which you are grounded upon as well. I pay my respects to elders past, present, and emerging, and honour their continued connection to the land, water, and culture. This land always was and still is Aboriginal land, and I acknowledge that sovereignty was never ceded. And I think that's a really great starting off point too, in having an acknowledgement for our sovereignty actually with this experience that we're going to have. Because we get to have that personal power, that sovereignty within ourselves to be able to create a motherhood experience that we desire. And we're going to be exploring, particularly today, a lot of the stuff that can feel as though it can hold us back from that, or create blocks to that, or create maybe pull us in the opposite direction of that. And so I'm just here to show you what some of the things that we can do to reclaim some of that personal power, some of that sovereignty to create a motherhood that we truly treasure. And so I'm going to do a little bit of, I suppose, housekeeping to start with. So this was originally going to be a 3-day experience. And I went for a swim yesterday. My mum ended up having our 2 littlest ones for a couple of hours, and I went for a swim in the ocean, and I came out and I was like, no, I want it to be a week long. So we're going to have the 3 days together live, and then the container is going to stay open until the end of next week so that we have that integration time. I'm also going to be opening up a Facebook group so that we can, like we are doing in Telegram as well, having some more bonus conversations. I'm going to be dropping in daily to share perhaps some inspirations, some invitations for you, or perhaps some prompts or something that you can play with. So we have just over a week together. And so I'm going to get you to consume this as you would anything that you would consume of mine, and that is with pleasure. So rule number 1 is do it with pleasure. So if that means, if you're watching the replay right now, then pausing that and making yourself a cup of tea, or grabbing some chocolate, or putting on some cozy Ugg boots, or laying out in the sun, then go and do that. At any stage, if you are here with me live, you're also welcome to get up, do what you need to do, move around, do whatever is going to make you feel good. So anything else? Let me check for my housekeeping notes, I suppose. This program, there's a good chance I'm going to be packaging this up to sell after next week. So it's going to have so much quality in it for you, and so much. I want you to just, even though this is a free experience, I really want you to know that there's so much value in here for you, and for you to bring your intention to this space, and for you to engage and connect and feel as though it's alive, and really make that time in your calendar so that you can either join us live or consume the replays as soon as you can, so we can really enjoy the rest of this kind of full week experience that we have together. So what I'm trying to say is, like, it is free, but value it, because it's going to be actually a paid experience. And, the more we can actually put our intention into something, the more we can really, I suppose, decide that something is valuable, the more value we're going to get out of it. What else? There's a couple of prizes. So if you would have received an email from me, and with it had the graphic of the saying, I've joined the Mother Lode. So I'm actually going to give you a couple of days until we finish those 3 live days to share that graphic if you want to be part of be in the draw to win a week's free coaching with me. And then I'm going to tell you at the end of this session something else that you can win if you want to be engaged for the rest of this week. So that's that. Now, I think we can get a move on from there. So I will give you a pretty brief kind of rundown of who I am and what I can share with you. And some of you might have heard this before, and that's okay. And just the same as with this content as well, some of this stuff might be really brand new ideas and concepts and invitations for you. For other people, it might all seem like stuff that they've already experienced or heard or practiced before. And that's okay too, because sometimes we just need these little reminders, you know? It's the same as like, you know, we probably know how to eat healthy. And sometimes it's really nice to get some inspiration from someone else to kind of give us that little kind of kickstart again to improve our health, perhaps. So my name is Regan Fig. I am, look, I'd call myself a pleasure mentor for mothers, but I also work with other women who are birthing other creations that aren't humans. And so I typically work with women, and our focus is on pleasure. And it might seem a little bit kind of superficial and luxurious and fluffy to other people. However, the ones as yourself coming to this work are here because they have this, what's the right word? They have almost like this ability to, or this desire to go deep, to actually start excavating some of the stuff that is within their body, within their psyche, start to look at themselves and their world and their life and not shy away from that. I think the word is courageous. That's the word I want to use. So it is actually quite courageous to desire a motherhood that is filled with gold. It is courageous to be open to experiencing more pleasure as a mother. It is courageous to desire a reality that really feels good and is aligned with you and your values. Because as you may already know from doing some of this kind of work, it's not all pleasurable, you know? So we use pleasure as the compass, typically back home to our whole selves. And in saying that, it's not always pleasurable. So if any of this does feel a little bit uncomfortable or like, oh, I don't want to look at that, or it might just feel a bit icky on your body, you know, always, if it doesn't feel safe, you don't have to go anywhere. If you don't feel comfortable doing it, I get that. So you can choose what you play with and what you don't play with, but just be aware that, you know, there can be some discomfort that will come up. Just like our little people who bring us so much to play with and heal and explore. And I think this is something that we, you know, are going to be exploring now, because I'd asked the question recently about, you know, what are some of the things that are really kind of holding you back from the riches of your motherhood experience. And just as, you know, our children can really trigger us or really evoke that kind of an uncomfortable response in us, so too can this experience in noticing what feels hard, like the things that are keeping us from feeling that that treasure of gold in our motherhood experience. So those things are not things to be bulldozed over, removed, seen as a problem, seen as something that needs to be fixed. Those are invitations for us to kind of like Pandora's box, like open them up, have a little look. If we want to keep them, we can keep them. If we don't want to, we don't have to. We can reframe them, we can repackage them. So we're going to learn a few things about what to do with those things over the next few days. Okay, so I'm also an author. I've just published my book, A Mother's Pleasure, and that is all about, it's the tagline is a guide to I've got it here, where is it? A modern guide to redefining motherhood. So again, within these pages, you will notice that there are some things that, you know, it's going to feel like you're being pretty courageous doing. And a lot of that has to do with our past conditioning, the fact that we've been socialized to, you know, put our pleasure in, you know, the last priority. And just as we're talking about here and exploring, you know, finding the gold in motherhood, and I'll share something that's in the book, you know, chances are you've probably started your motherhood journey from a place of, knowing, in inverted commas, that motherhood's not meant to be a field of gold. It's not meant to be an absolute treasure chest of treasures. It's not meant to be, a gold mine. It's meant to be hard and mundane and, unglamorous. And, my book and part of the work and what I'm going to share in this experience is that doesn't need to be true. So it's not to say that if you aren't experiencing all the gold that there is in motherhood, that you're doing it wrong. It's to say that there's a lot stacked against us to just naturally experience, this field of gold in motherhood. So that is already there. However, we can shift it without even having to change our circumstances, without having to actually, I'm going to say it like this, without changing anything, we can still change things. Okay. So you'll know what I mean as we go through. I'll just check how we're going for time and see if anyone else wants to pop in. Okay, great. All right, so I might even, the first thing that I'm thinking of, so for anyone who's worked with me before, you'll be aware that there's things that I want to share and pieces of the puzzle that are going to, we're going to put together throughout these next few days. But I will journey through intuitively. So I'm going to suspect that the reason that you might be here, obviously we've established because you're courageous. And also, chances are, just as I was talking about before, chances are you might actually desire and crave more from your motherhood experience. And when I say more, it doesn't need to be, material type of more, but more than what you're experiencing now, in the sense of maybe it's more joy, maybe it's more freedom, maybe it's more peace, maybe it's more fun, maybe it's more connection. Perhaps you're one of these people who really are continuing, really focused on evolving. And we're all naturally evolving as it is. But, perhaps for you, a focus on motherhood is one of your top values. So if that is you, I hear you, I feel you, I see you, we're going to have fun. Chances are there's probably going to be some of you who are sort of, just starting out in this kind of an adventure, and others of you who this has been a really, this has been a focus for a really long time, and you've learned a lot along the way. As I said before, some of these might feel like reminders for you, and that's okay too. So I'm going to start with something that I share in my book. And what I learned exploring pleasure, well, one of the things that I learned when I was exploring pleasure in motherhood is that we can have a look at pleasure through the framework of essentialism. So essentialism is where we ultimately, the essence of something creates our experience of it. So I'll give you an example. It's kind of like, the age-old like wine experiment where they pour from the same it's the same wine, and people are taste testing, and they'll pour the same wine in, a bunch of different cups. But they might have poured it, from like a really expensive bottle. And the next one might be look like a really cheap bottle. And they'll probably tell the testers, this one's the really expensive one, or, they give them information. And based on that, even though it's the same wine, the taste testers will typically favor and receive more pleasure and enjoyment and have a better experience from the wine that they believe is of higher value. And so it's the same with pleasure. It's the same with our motherhood experience. So with pleasure, it's the kind of thing of if you are having a really good time in bed with someone and halfway through you somehow manage to discover that it's like your long lost uncle, chances are that's not going to feel very pleasurable anymore, right? You're laughing. Yes, exactly. So it's not just, the physical experience that creates our experience. It's not just that physical experience that creates our reality. It is also like the essence of something. So what we make things mean, what we believe to be true about something, the history of something, the nature of it, the essence, like what it's made from. And so when you think about motherhood, you know, chances are, and again, this is something that I've mentioned in this same kind of area of the book, it's like we often start motherhood not on a baseline of 0 in terms of our assumptions of what our experience is going to be like. We often start in the red, like negative, because we've been, again, you know, as I mentioned before, socialized to believe that it can be really hard and very unglamorous, and you come last and you've got to do everything for everyone, and it's a big sacrifice. And so, of course, if you are, you know, entering motherhood with these beliefs and ideas and this kind of lens, then that's what you're going to experience, and that's what you're going to notice and what you're going to see. What we focus on, we find evidence for. So what does that have anything to do with the finding of gold in our motherhood, in finding the jewels and the gems, and like what we really value in our motherhood experience? Well, for starters, obviously, if we have these kind of default programs or this a lifetime of socialization and beliefs around what motherhood means, it's going to take a little bit of dancing with and unboxing and throwing a few things out and rewriting a few things and pulling a few new things in to really start to change that lens of what we believe to be true about motherhood. Change the lens, change the experience. Do you know what I mean when I'm saying the lens? Does that make sense? Yeah. Okay. So how can we do that? How can we do that? So there's many ways. We can play with something that I call flipping your shit. You're going to flip your shit. So when you are telling yourself something or hearing thoughts in your mind or having a experience that, you know, doesn't align with what you desire, you can start to flip that. So again, this might be something you've played with before, so we can play with it again, because even still, this is stuff that this is a practice for me for over the last 6 years. It's been my mission to find pleasure in motherhood and experience and open to pleasure. You know, for example, I no longer seek pleasure. I'm just opening to pleasure, in the sense of, if I'm seeking pleasure or if I'm trying to have a good motherhood experience, you know, I'm basically telling the universe, the world, like myself, my unconscious, that I'm trying or I'm seeking and I'm not quite getting there. So I would invite you just to now think about some things that have perhaps happened recently, and think about what it is that what happened, for example, and something that maybe triggered you, something that feels really frustrating or really upsetting or annoying, that feels like it certainly isn't the gold in your motherhood right now. And I want you to start to see it in a different light. So what we're going to basically experience here is, you know, finding a whole new perspective. Our perspectives are the things that can create the quality of our experience, create the quality of our relationships. And so just by changing our perspective, we can change our experience, we can change the quality of our relationships and all sorts of stuff. So I'll give an example of something that I shared just the other day. On Saturday, like Saturdays are normally my date my business, romance my business, maybe do some yoga at the beach kind of morning. So I have a few hours to myself when Jake has the 3 kids. And last Saturday, as part of my looking after myself a little bit better routine, I took myself to get a blood test. And so I'm waiting in at the pathology for 45 minutes. And I mean, even before I knew I was going to be waiting for 45 minutes, I arrived and there was so many people in front of me that I had to wait outside with a whole bunch of other people because there was only a certain amount of seats inside. And so I started being like, oh God, this is taking forever. So I started to feel really annoyed about that. And again, like, this is what I mean, it's a practice. I was like, well, how could I actually consider this is benefiting me? How can I use what we call Cartesian logic on focusing on the not problem? So what is like not the problem here? And so I asked myself a few little questions like, well, how is this benefiting me? How is this of advantage to me? What is, you know, what's not an issue here? And some of the things I came up with was like, well, for starters, I was able to, the work that I needed to do was on my phone, which is what I had anyway. So I was able to do that. There was no need to like actually pay at a coffee shop to like sit down and do my work. So I was saving myself some money. I also had like no distractions because, you know, like pathology, no one looks at each other, no one talks to each other. So it was super quiet, even quieter outside. And I realized I also didn't have like my laptop or my notebook or anything with me that would, you know, be sitting with me at a coffee shop table. So I didn't have any other distractions, or, you know, I didn't feel like I was getting pulled in any other directions. So I actually got so much done in that 45 minutes, and I was actually really thankful in the end. And I was like, wow, this is like so beneficial. Whereas chances are, if I was just sitting there getting annoyed, I'd be checking the time. I would probably not even be conscious of like, well, how could this benefit me? If I didn't ask myself that question, chances are I wouldn't have even thought like, oh, well, do the work that you can do that's, you know, available to be done on your phone. Some of the graphics for the mother lode I created in the pathology. Great. I love Canva on an app. So yeah, chances are if I didn't have that awareness, if I didn't allow myself that invitation to consider how this could be benefiting me, chances are I probably would have just sat on my phone and scrolled, maybe made a couple of phone calls, like just kind of like used up the time. And then I would have been annoyed because I would have spent almost an hour just kind of stuffing around. Not making the most of my time, I should say, because sometimes a little bit of a scroll is nice too, you know? And so I remind myself, and I would invite you to play with this as well, like consider, how is this not a problem? How is the thing that I see as a problem in my motherhood experience, how is it not a problem? You know, and the same goes for if, you know, gold in motherhood for you is, you know, peace and quiet. You could also ask the question of like, how is not getting peace and quiet not the problem? Now, these are some of these questions are like neural linguistic programming type questions of Cartesian logic, which actually kind of scramble your brain a little bit. They feel a bit confusing. So I might even add in, I'll make a note now, I'm going to add in a bunch of questions that you can go to for these kind of experiences. So that you can scramble up your brain a little bit and then eventually be like, hang on, is this even a problem? And then you get confused about what even is the problem, what's not the problem. So Cartesian logic, that's a lot to do with like, what is the not problem? Just let me know if I've confused you. I'm going to go find my page. Just bear with me a sec. So looking at what's not the problem. So we've talked about essentialism and how what we make motherhood mean actually like changes our experience of it. And we've also talked about Cartesian logic, what's not the problem, and finding the benefits to the thing that we think is the problem. So if we consider that in terms of our experience of motherhood, then let's say, for example, that, you know, our kids fighting with each other and being really loud. Let's just go with the loud example, like when you've got, because this one is close to my heart. You know, maybe you're quite auditory sensitive. I know by the end of the day, you know, sometimes I am in particular, you know, it's like dinner time and everyone's yelling and screaming. It's like, oh my gosh. So say, for example, your kids yelling and screaming and being loud feels like the problem. And if only they'd be quiet and there was a little bit of peace, I would actually feel like so much more soothed. Chances are that's true. There's a million other possibilities that could be true as well. So you could invite yourself to question, like, how is this not a problem? And how is this benefiting me? How is this an advantage? And so it might be that maybe that's the way that your kids are actually regulating themselves, so they're going to make bedtime easier. Maybe it is that they are confident enough for self-expression. Maybe it is that you get to witness them in their excitement. Maybe it is, I don't know, fill in the blank. And from here, chances are there'll be times where you're like, I'm already sensing like receiving this kind of an idea. There's going to be some of you who are like, yeah, but that's all well and good, but, or like, oh, but what about this experience? And that's why we have day 3 together of our Q&A, so that you can actually not so much, bring questions about, the particular content, like, that's welcome as well. But you can bring some of these scenarios of like, I actually have no idea how to see any gold in this. Like, I feel like there's no gems, no jewels, maybe even just coal. How can I bring like a better perspective, or how can I find some of that hidden treasure? It seems like it's hidden really deep. So we can bring those on day 3. So we've spoken about like some benefits. And then the other piece to that, for using that same example of your kids being super loud and excited and, just, almost causing you grief. Then the other thing I would invite you to consider is, if you are seeking peace and quiet, if peace and quiet is something that feels like gold for you at the moment, then I would invite you to be open to seeing and experiencing more of that. So again, putting on that lens of peace and quiet. So not focusing on the times when they are loud. So this is why I said it's close to my heart, because growing up, I was always very loud. I was the crazy one, the wild one. I was always very loud. And so that has a little sticky point for me, in that, somewhere along the line, I'd somehow internalized that was a bad thing. And so, how wonderful it is that we have children that bring this stuff up for us. My firstborn, he is like very similar to that, particularly even when he was a toddler. And so very loud, very wild, very crazy. And I found that hard. I didn't feel like there was much gold in that. And it was interesting because as I started to become aware of this kind of stuff, I was able to realize that had something to do with the fact that for me personally, I felt like there would be rejection for him. I felt like people would judge him. So I was trying to dampen him, to protect him. And because, I also started to revisit some of those feelings of perhaps not belonging or being seen in a light that I didn't want to be seen in. And so where am I going with this? Okay, so number one, obviously, when we are feeling like, oh God, I cannot find any gold in this situation, I'm really triggered, there is still gold there. And so it could be that there are some benefits to you, some secondary benefits. There's always going to be benefits for something, right? For everything. The other piece is that chances are there's stuff for you to explore there for yourself as well. And the other thing is to, consider that, and this is what I found interesting, his carers at preschool just loved how enthusiastic he was. That was the word that they used. And I was like, I love how they're seeing it from that perspective, because they obviously don't have those kind of hang-ups that I had about it, And so perspective, as I was saying, perspective is so valuable. So if we can change our perspective on something, we can change the experience of it, which I've said a couple of times now. So, changing that perspective. So even if you are seeking that peace and that quiet, focus on the peace and quiet. So notice when, and this is the same kind of part of the story, I would notice then when my little 3 or 4-year-old son was sitting quietly, like reading books, or when he was in the garden looking for worms, and there was peace and quiet. And it's so easy that we can have this this absolute language of like, they're always noisy, or they're always loud, or they're always messy. And when we focus on that, that's what we'll find. And so this is an invitation to you to consider focusing on the opposite of that, focusing on what the gold is that you hope to find. Is this making sense? Yeah. Okay, cool. If you would like, you're welcome to maybe pop some questions or anything in the chat box, anything you want to share. I'll grab a drink and answer any of those questions. I'm going between two different cups here today. I found one and I didn't think one would be enough. Actually, Emily, if you want to unmute, you're welcome to do that too. Let's do that.
Thank you. I'm really slowly typing. No, it makes perfect sense. And I was like thinking, I've got so many examples, scenarios that I can relate that to. And I think, like you saying, there's absolutely gold in all of them. It's just like, there's one that stands out to me that, like, I know there's gold there, but it's almost like I don't know, maybe I don't want to particularly find it. It's like toxic family or like relationships, or but I even know the gold in that, actually. If I think about it, it's like every time I have those interactions, as challenging and draining, exhausting as they are, I'm able to like come away with this really reaffirming sense of, I don't know, like my values and the way we're parenting, and just lots of things personally. So that was
Oh, great. And that's what I mean, like seeking pleasure. Like when you notice something's not pleasurable, like, you know, interactions with other people that, you know, relationships seem really difficult or like even aggravating or maybe friction causing, you know, it's also an opportunity to being able to tune in with your body, with your intuition, know where your boundaries lie and all of those kind of things, being able to stand up for yourself. Yeah, that's cool. So, you know, you'll hear me next time being like, and what are the advantages here?
Yeah. I know. Yeah. It's more like in the moment. So it's good to I think that's the part for me, because it's like, I can go away and have those reflections, but just in the moment. And even like the kids fighting, or just excitement, really like loud. Got two boys and they just
it's like my two boys too.
So just like in the moment, how can I?
Yes. And look, this is all very kind of mental type of stuff today. Tomorrow, we're going to be diving into the body. So learning how we can still have those kind of things that trigger us, or those kind of beliefs of why it's a problem, and yet still be able to be with that and to soothe ourselves, and to eventually get to a point where that, you know, it doesn't even affect us anymore. So glorious. Okay, any questions before I move on?
No, I think that's all good.
Okay, cool. All right. So, yes, bring all the scenarios. Okay, so let me tune in with what I want to share here. I think I want to really hone in the idea about our lenses and filters. So through neuro-linguistic programming, of which I'm a practitioner for, we talk about these 7 different filters that we have. So we are intaking between 2 and 11 million bits of information. So from the research I've done on, because I'm a little bit of a science nerd, like for example, information theory and what I've been taught through NLP and what Dr. Joe Dispenza says, it's between 2 and 11 million pieces, like bits of information, data that's coming at us in like every second. And so what we actually do is we've got these 7 kind of little filters that shake all of those little bits out, and we only retain like 7 plus or minus 2 chunks of information. So that is based on our language. So for example, if you are, you know, hearing someone talking another language, you can't take in any of that information. The information is either like deleted, distorted, or generalized. So if we, for example, as I was saying, if we're sitting with someone who's trying to speak to us in another language, that all that information is going to get deleted because we actually can't take it in. It's like going to get removed immediately. Things will be distorted based on like our beliefs, based on, again, like this kind of idea of essentialism, or it can be generalized as well. So I'm not going to go too much into this because there is a lot. But some of these filters are language, what we believe to be true. So our beliefs, our emotions, like the state that we're in at the time, our meta programs, which is kind of like what kind of person we are. We're someone who's on time, or we usually run late. Are we someone who's normally organized or not very organized? Are we in time or in line with time? So you don't need to know that kind of information. All the information I invite you to know is that there is so much out there available, like endless possibilities and opportunities and experiences and realities that is actually available to us. But based on these 7 little filters that we have, we're only taking in these tiny chunks. Okay, like such a minute amount. And so if we, obviously we can't particularly, I mean, we could change our language, we can learn that. But some of the things that are really powerful that we can change is our beliefs. And so when we do start to see or decide to believe that something is different, we're then going to experience more of that in our life. So if you are, this is just a really general example, if you're like, oh my gosh, everything is so expensive at the moment, then you're going to notice all the really expensive things when you go grocery shopping. You're going to notice all the expensive bills. You're going to notice all the times when, you order a coffee and it seems so much more expensive than your normal cup of coffee. So you're kind of focusing on that. And this is what I say, what we focus on, we find the evidence for. And the reason why this is important is because when we focus on the problem, it really magnifies it. We'll find more evidence for that. Do you know how many times I found the evidence of my firstborn being really loud? A lot. And, obviously that's I mean, trying to find peace, you'd feel like that can't contend with loud, because loud hits you. And so sometimes the gold that we want to find, we actually do need to really seek it. So we do need to or I invite you to change that lens. So instead of believing that everything's so expensive and then seeing everything that's so expensive, if we start to go, there's some really, great discounts, or there is so much more specials on at the moment, or there are still things that are cheap, then you're probably going to notice when you're at the supermarket, the things that are really cheap, you'll be like, oh, I could make this, that, and whatever with these items. That's really cheap, So you'll probably focus on the cheaper things. So if you're making a budget, of course, it would be a great idea to really start to focus on how cheap stuff is, because you'll find the cheaper stuff. So with our motherhood experience, with the example of peaceful, quiet, spaciousness versus loud, in your face, what's the opposite of spaciousness? Too much going on, if we decide to focus on the peace and the quiet, that's where we'll find ourselves. That's where we're going to focus. That's what we're going to zone in on. And this is part of why pleasure is so important. Because if how do I put this? We cannot experience pleasure and not be in the present moment. So there's only 2 ways you can experience pleasure, okay? The first way is through your body, and the second way is in our imagination. So when we're in imagination, even, we've got to be really in it. We've got to be present. We can't be thinking of a million different things, or we can't really access that part of our imagination. And the other big piece, obviously, is our body, actually being present. How many times have you gotten to the end of your cup of tea or your coffee or whatever you're drinking, and you're like, did somebody else drink that? How many times have you started eating a really nice meal? Maybe it's yummy pancakes or something. You have a couple of bites and then all of a sudden the plate's empty. Or what about if you go for a nice swim and, you're out of the ocean? Actually, it's really hard to not be present in nature, I feel, So ultimately how did I get onto that? We're focusing on what we're desiring. Pleasure, and it brings us into the present. So chances are the things that you probably want to experience more are found in the present moment. And maybe that is connection with your kids. So let's get present. We're going to learn a lot more about doing that with our body tomorrow and throughout the rest of the week. maybe that is like enjoying being in nature. And I'm going to touch on this part here when it comes to our natural intelligence before we move on to the body tomorrow. So chances are you'll know that when you're in nature, gosh, it's easy to like soothe your nervous system. It's easy to look around and have reverence for that present moment. It's easy to look around and really be like, this is nice, you know, I'm grateful for this. And what I believe that to be, what I have come to believe that to be, is our recognition of natural intelligence. So our recognition, almost like a recognition of part of our natural self, part of ourselves. We're recognizing part of ourself within nature. Now, I see this also with experiencing, you know, taking in music. If you ever go and see like, you know, a musician or a band, it can be so easy to, you know, get pleasure from that. It can be so easy to, you know, feel like you're in a pot of gold. It can be so easy to just have the best time. And again, I feel like it's this recognition with our natural intelligence through the consciousness of the music, you know, through the person that has crafted and created that thing. And again, like we can meet that natural intelligence with our children. You know, it's going to be really hard to be angry and pissed off when we are face to face with our little child and looking into their eyes, you know. So that might be something that you want to play with as well. You know, not even finding, but just noticing when you can be eye level with your child. My daughter, she's almost 2, and I know that when she stands on our countertop, when I'm like standing or sitting, when she's on the countertop and I'm like got my thermo going on, we're making pancakes this morning, I know I'm perfect eye level with her. And I love that. Not the safest place for her to be, don't worry, I'm there, but it's perfect, you know. And it's time that I'm going to be looking somewhere else. So I'm going to spend that time placing my eyeballs and my vision on something. Why not direct it to my children where I can find some of that gold, you know? So if presence with your children is something that you are craving, that feels like treasure, then that's a small invitation and a simple kind of practice. Maybe seeing if you can put them at eye height if you're cooking, even just like talking to them, looking in their eyes. So connecting with our natural intelligence is going to bring us closer to reverence for life. And ultimately, you know, what we're exploring this week in the Mother Lode is having that reverence for life and for our life. So what I invite you to do now is start to get really clear on what it is you desire, what it is that is your gold, your treasure, your riches. Even if you're just jotting down different words, you know, or maybe it's experiences that you want to have, or it's feelings or ways of being, like jotting them all down. If you find it difficult, then I invite you to start by thinking about what it is you don't want. What's the opposite of gold? You know, what's the kind of the coal? What's the coal in the mine? Although that's valuable to some people too, right? So we're only talking about you and your unique desires and values. What would make you really feel like you are squeezing all the juice out of life and that it's bringing it all back to you? Like, what does that look like? So take it to your journal, bring it into the group this week, share it around. Chances are we're going to want to borrow each other's, because we're like, oh yeah, that's a good one too, you know. Because desire as women, as mothers, can be really tricky to access sometimes. You know, there's so much power in just knowing what it is that we desire. Honestly, I know I've spoken a lot and I've shared a bunch of different things, and I feel like we've kind of got these puzzle pieces a little bit scrambled, but they're all still there. They're coming together. But you're going to find the little pieces that you can play with that are pretty simple and ultimately really powerful. So jumping in tomorrow, because that's pretty much time, a little bit more. Does anyone have any questions so far? Let me know. Nope, we're all good. Okay, cool. All right. Well, I'm going to leave it there. I'm going to stop the recording for now, and I'll see you guys in our, well, in the Telegram group, and I'm also going to create the Facebook group. So we've got that space to play in for the week. If you do want to be in the draw to win a week coaching with me, then you can share that graphic that you're in here. And that's what I was going to share as well. So if you are someone who is really getting involved, really engaging, sharing, answering questions, in the lives, then you are going to get yourself some bonus points, because I have a really incredible program coming up early next year, and there is going to be an opportunity for someone to get in there at 50% off. So I'm just now thinking maybe there's something I can give you instantly. Let me think about that. But you're going to get some gold. That's all I'll say. All right, I'm going to leave it there, and I will see you guys tomorrow. Same time, same place. Bye for now. Bye.